Welcome to our weekly program, The Inside Story of Chabad in America through the Mindel Archives. Last week we spoke about Mr. Julius Stillman in our program. Also we mentioned about the Manhattan Learning Group led by Mr. Alexander Cowan to professionals, scientists, and intellectuals. Now I will explain. In the early years, when the Frierdiker Rebbe came to America in 1940, when he arrived, one of his important projects was he began with education. And the same thing also, the Rebbe, when he came in 1941, he continued what the Frierdiker Rebbe began, education. So one such effort was the weekly Torah program established in Manhattan, taught by Mr. Cowan, with the participation of Rabbi Mindel. The Frierdiker Rebbe encouraged Rabbi Mindel to attend and write to him a detailed report every time he went to the class. It was once a week. So the Frierdiker Rebbe took a big interest in these early classes, and with a detail. This is, I think, more a Ruchnisdiker Inyan, as we'll see soon. And Rabbi Mindel wrote every week, he wrote a report, a detailed report. Now, we might say that this was a forerunner for the couples group today, the JLI, and also young professionals today, that Chabad is Matzliach, is because of that class that the Frierdiker Rebbe and the Rebbe put so much keiches into that class. Now we say, there says, Maise Ovei Simon Lebanim. This class set a path how we should continue today, and enabled us to be Matzliach today. Just like in Mitzrayim, when Avraham Avinu went to Mitzrayim, so Avraham Avinu went to Mitzrayim to make a path for the Yidden later on when they were in Golus Mitzrayim, and they should go out of Mitzrayim. So Avraham Avinu, this was the beginning. This was a path for the Yidden that should be able to overcome everything from years later. So now I want to read to you in detail, and I will read it because this was written in Hebrew. Rabbi Mindel wrote the report in Hebrew, and I will translate this into English. And if we have time today, we are going to also read what the Frierdiker Rebbe answered on this letter. If we don't have time, we'll have to leave it for next week. So here, this is from the Hebrew that Rabbi Mindel wrote the report to the Frierdiker Rebbe. 20 of Cheshvan 5704 1944. Kveit Kedushas Admur Shlita, the Frierdiker Rebbe. Peace and blessing. This is to give a short report on the learning group given by Mr. Alexander Cowan, which I attended this week. As is known, the learning takes place weekly on Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. in the waiting room of the dentist. The dentist's name was Dr. Morris. The Frierdiker Rebbe wanted to know details. When I arrived exactly at 8:30, already found some people which increased shortly to over 20 men and about 5 women, in addition to a few singles, all around approximately in the 30s. These people were all new to me, except 2 people, Mr. Julius Stillman and Rabbi Alexander Cowan. He was a lawyer. They called him Rabbi. Was seated at the small table full of books, Chumoshim, Sidurim, and more. And the rest were sitting in various places around the room. a relatively small room, Mr. Alexander Cowan introduced me to the assembled and took the opportunity to introduce them to the work of the Rebbe. He does this regularly to acquaint them with the Rebbe's work. I'm reading from the Hebrew. The learning began with an introduction that the goal of this learning group is not to make them ultra-religious Haredim, but rather to acquaint them with the great value of the Torah and mitzvahs, and after that, being that they are mature, thinking individuals, they will come to their own realization on the matter of religion. The lesson itself is the reading by Rabbi Cowan from a text, the Bible unauthorized. And as we once mentioned, there was a whole shaila who wrote the Bible unauthorized, but that's another program that we are not going to do today. His finished the chapter from the previous lesson about Hashem, and he started the chapter of the creation. He read the first 2 verses as explained in the book. Altogether, they were around 6 pages, which took over an hour. He reads and everyone listens attentively, without explanation. He just reads as they are mature enough and surely able to understand. Now, he wrote in next paragraph, he wrote, this has nothing to do with the whole thing, but I'm going to read that. That's where he wrote to the Frierdiker Rebbe. After this, he took out a paragraph from an English newspaper message by General Shamutz from South Africa for English youth, in which he inspires them to faith in Hashem and also shares memories from his youth, when his father was a bookseller in London, and he would come to the store and how he celebrated his bar mitzvah. Okay. For questions and discussions, there was not much time left. But before that, he asked me to say a few words. And because the topic was Torah and secular science, I related what I had heard from the Ramah. And by the way, since Rabbi Midel worked with the Ramash, with the Rebbe, for 10 years, so the Rebbe, by working for many hundreds of hours, the Rebbe told him in Yonim. So he wrote it down. That's something that we can spend more programs about that. But the Rebbe told him things. So he mentioned what the Ramash told him from the Zohar regarding the fact that the earth is round, the cycles of day and night, as it is stated also in the English calendar, which is in print now. Now, what he means by the English calendar means that here we gave out a book here. It's called the From Day to Day. This was given a small booklet, like a calendar from Kahos gave it out years ago, and then they stopped printing. So we printed this. We made it in 2 years from day to day. This was very important by the Rebbe, and as a matter of fact, that Rabbi Greenglass, I think I mentioned once, wrote to the Rebbe in 1944, I write you so many letters and you don't answer. So the Rebbe answered, because I am busy with the day, from day to day, for the children. By the Rebbe, this was before the Hayom Yom. This was a very choshev inyan by the Rebbe. In passing, I told him about the Zohar in general. This topic made a very strong impression, and they seemed to be in awe. Then he writes to the Frierdiker Rebbe the 2 questions which this topic inspired. Number 1, Mr. Stillman asked Rabbi Alexander Cowan that he was under the impression that the world was created by the thought of the Creator, and not with speech. This is what he heard. Is that so? Mr. Stillman asked. Rabbi Alexander Cowan answered that this cannot be, as it is written that with 10 words the world was created. So it can be with machshava, has to be with Dibur. Then Rabbi Mindel writes, I made a comment here that according to my understanding, and also this is not clear, both are correct. And I think he heard something from the Ramash then. But that's what he answered. Because in truth, when it came to the thought of the Creator to create the world, it was created. And the speaking are the combination of the letters and the tzimtzumim within which were clothed at the material things. Since the Creator had no one at this point to whom to speak, because Adam Harishon wasn't created yet, as there was no creation yet, in general, this is a deep concept which cannot so easily be understood. And in Mirz Hashem, in a few programs, I will share with you Ksav Yad from the Rebbe, pages and pages, how the Rebbe answered this question about creation, which we'll do it in a few programs later. So this is what Rabbi Mindel answered, that it can be machshava and dibur. Question number 2, if the Torah is so exalted and wise, how do you explain the fact that the knowledge of Torah is not so widespread, nor accepted the world over? If it's so wise, shouldn't everybody know? Here Rabbi Alexander Cohen started to go on the length into an explanation without quite touching on the question. The matter remained unresolved. At this point, I asked permission to answer, and I said that the advantage of light comes about through darkness, when there is both the one and the other, as when one goes from a dark room to a bright room. The intention of the Creator is that man should come to the recognition in truth after searching without finding it in other places. And the prophets already prophesied that the day will come when all who inhabit the earth will recognize the kingdom of Hashem, and all will come to Mount Zion to learn the wisdom of the Torah. This is what Rabbi Mindel answered. Now, Rabbi Cohen added on this what Rabbi Mindel said, that this can be compared to a person who is in a factory where the noise of the machines are very loud, and due to the great noise, one is not able to hear the sweet music of the symphony playing outside because he's in the factory. So he says the world is now engrossed in science and is not paying attention to what is written in the Torah. And this is the answer that Rabbi Alexander answered. This is just giving a report to the Rebbe. At 11:30, all went home. What should we do? My comments. Because the Rebbe wanted that Rabbi Mindel should tell him the comments, what he saw. So he writes A, B, and C. The reading from the text is too long, since the topic, as deep as this, needs a great deal of focus, and this can be done maximum for a half an hour. Actually, I noticed from the expression of some people that it was only after at least an hour that they began to comprehend, besides after a half an hour of reading. There is plenty food of discussion. He just read, everybody was listening for 1 hour. Now, B, there needs to be more time allowed for questions, as I was told by some that they have so many questions and not enough time to deal with them. Part of the difficulty here is that Rabbi Cohen likes to talk, and he tends to touch on a topic and then wanders from one topic to another. Not that this is not interesting. It is interesting. But the time does not allow for this, and the question is not answered satisfactorily. C. This is the main point, in my opinion. I think we should have one person designated to write down the questions and the answers. This has a double advantage. Number one, we will be able to know what questions are troubling the people and be able to, in the future, to use the books which deal with these topics, and in general with the spiritual challenges of these times of Americans. And number two, as to the answers, we will be able to study them later and see if there was sufficiently and accurately answered. And then he writes, if we see that the questions were not adequately answered, Rabbi Cohen will be able to get the full answer and explain it at the next session. The above suggestions I did not mention to Rabbi Cohen nor to the group. If the Rebbe deems these valid and necessary, he will surely find a way to appraise Rabbi Cohen of them. The people of the group, he writes, are thirsty for the truth, an indescribable thirst, which pulls them to the utmost depth of the truth. As to the level of their understanding, I do not know, although they seem to be knowledgeable, but in matters of Torah they are ignorant, Rahmanul Islam. They likely can barely read Hebrew, but it could be I am mistaken. In their eyes, Rabbi Cohen is the highest authority and the last word of halacha, even though Rabbi Cohen himself tells them they cannot count on his psak, legal decision. There are questions that he addresses to the Rebbe for answers. It is a pity that Rabbi Cohen does not exert his greatest effort into such a challenge task as this. It's hard for me to understand how one can conduct such a class without the necessary, proficiency necessary in matters of Torah learning. Plain reading Mishnah, Halacha, Haggadah, revealed in esoteric parts of Torah. With all of this, I find that this class is not only interesting, but that it has great potential. If things go as planned, we should aim to grow and draw in more people from this circle. And Rabbi Mindel signs. Now, we have an answer from the Frierdiker Rebbe, a very, very important answer about the whole class, how much koyach he put into that, which we have no time to do today. We will do it next week. But I want to say something today because it's a week before Tisha B'Av. Some people, Tisha B'Av is coming up, and some people want to know about fasting, Tisha B'Av. Some people have health problems. So I want to just relate to you a very short story that I once mentioned, and each one can do what they have to. Rabbi Mindel, when he was in his 20s in Russia, he was beaten up by a few goyim very badly, and he had a problem with his ear. So he had a problem with his ears. I mean, he couldn't hear that well. But that wasn't the main problem. The main problem was that it affected his whole body, and he had to eat every 3-4 hours, and affected his whole body. So he went to the Frierdiker Rebbe, and he asked the Frierdiker Rebbe, what should he do Tisha B'Av about fasting? Mele Yom Kippur, of course, there's no question. He fasted. He fasted. I mean, he went to shul a part time. He lie down, so he managed. But Tisha B'Av is not Yom Kippur. What should he do as far as fasting? So the previous Rebbe told him, ask a Rav. And so before he walked out, he called him back and he smiled and he says, vergiss nicht fragen a klugen Rav. You shouldn't forget to ask a smart Rav. So he went to Reb Shmuel Levitin. He was his Rav. He was a smart Rav. So he told him that the Rebbe said I should ask a smart Rav what I should do Tisha B'Av. So Rabbi Levitin told him, if the Rebbe says ask a smart Rav, you can eat a half a day. The Rebbe didn't say ask a Rav who is a machmir. The Rebbe didn't say ask a Rav who is a mekel. Ask a klugen Rav, a smart Rav. Because everything you can have one shaila, one person can ask one thing, and the answer to him is completely different. So a person should have a klugen rov. The same thing also. I think it's a hiroah that when people have a problem, they don't know what to do Tisha B'Av, ask a klugen rov. Okay, since we have no time to answer today, the beautiful answer from the Vedic Rebbe, we will have to leave it for next week. Thank you very much.